And we go live. Hang on, I'm getting a bit of a. Yes, we are live now. And if all is well, we have we are streaming to LinkedIn, and if all is well, we're streaming to YouTube. If all is well, we're streaming to other things, but I'm not really sure. so, so I don't know who's
Right.
who's listening to this, but we will be we'll be talking about storytelling.
Yes. Yes.
And I was really interested in storytelling for a long time, but also I felt that I don't know why, but it didn't disappear, but I just remember it being extremely popular, and there were these communities of storytellers and storytelling things, events, and somehow I don't know if that's true, but maybe also because of COVID, I don't know, but somehow they disappeared a bit, I think. But it's just my limited kind of view on this. And then the last few years, it's been sort of re-emerging again. So that's something interesting I would love to hear your point of view on. But also, in general, storytelling in general, why this is so important for business. And but I would like to start with you just posted something about celebrating because you ran a workshop, storytelling workshop, and I ran a workshop too on storytelling a couple of like 2 weeks ago, which was exciting as well. And anyway, I'd love to kind of hear your point of view. First of all, start with the post that you just did a workshop on storytelling, and I don't know, you had a thought about you should celebrate.
Yes. So I did this workshop. It was called Storytelling 101 with the Future Skills Academy, an organization. Have you heard of it? It's kind of new, but it's very cool.
Vaguely. It's somewhere, I don't know. Maybe is it close? Is it here?
Yeah. It's close to everyone. It's everyone.
Yeah.
It's close to everyone. It's very accessible. It's online. It's international. And I had a group from primarily Europe. There was one person, Maria, who joined from Australia, and we over an hour and a half learned some structure around how to tell a story quickly, how to make sure it was about something. So that is what separates a story from just information. Information's just information. Doesn't need to have structure. It doesn't need to follow any particular stream. You can just list it as bullet points. This happened, this happened, this happened. But what makes something a story is that it's about something beyond just those points of information. There's a bigger thing or theme, feeling, emotion, context wrapped around it. And then they got that happening. So they got information, they got a point of view around it, they got a storyteller who was telling the story. And at the end, they all told the story. And it was a celebrated moment because everyone felt like they learned something, and they also felt more confident in their ability to actually tell a story, to go out and just say, you know what, this is my story, I'm going to tell it.
Is it something that, by the way, if you're listening, and there's people listening right now, if you have a question around storytelling, do just put that in the comments. We actually will see it appear. I'll try to kind of respond to that. Yeah, but so, I mean, actually, so it's interesting how, aren't we always telling stories? I mean, isn't there, once you start paying attention to it, isn't everything, maybe it's not, maybe they're bad, maybe we're not conscious of it, so we tell them the wrong way, but aren't we always, I mean, we're referring to, if I share information with you, something I believe in, something I discovered, something I experienced, and there's the story elements are there, right?
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. we're telling stories all the time. I have this story that I'm going to tell you now
Oh,
about
all right.
the first time someone asked me to teach them storytelling. So most of the things I do now, I never set out to do, was never intentional. And I started training people in storytelling because someone approached me and said, "Oh, you're such a good storyteller. I love your stories." And do you do that? Do you train people in storytelling? And I said, I could. It's not like an offering at the moment, but I definitely could train you. So I said, "Why do you think you can't tell a story?" And then he told me a story about how bad he was at telling stories.
Exactly.
And so I said, "You realize you just told me a story. That was a story about how bad you are at telling stories." And then he said, "Oh, I know, but I'm really bad at it." And I said, "Okay, um, okay, yep, I'll teach you." So I developed a program to take him through. But I think a lot of it is confidence,
Right.
like knowing what you're going to say and then going, "Yep, I know exactly how I'm going to do this," right?
So this is my experience as well. So I ran this storytelling workshop the other day. It was 6 hours. So
Mhm.
in person, which is yeah, it's better than online, to be honest.
Mhm.
Really much better because there's a group and you can actually have people pair up, and there's so much more going on. Also, body language and people standing up and sharing a story is different than just going off mute, right? And then telling your story. But I realized that, first of all, if someone tells a story, so this is a group of executives, and one of them shared. So one of the assignments was to kind of think about stories that were about transformation in your life, things that you
Mm.
experienced that really shaped you, or yeah. So so one of them stood up and shared this story, and after sharing this story, and this was a story about going through a really difficult time in her life. I won't go into details, but what was interesting is that I asked the group, like, okay, so this is your colleague. Now she shared this really vulnerable story about their something very private, but about a transformation, about learning something, going through a difficult time, and coming out of it stronger. But you're now looking at a different person, aren't you? And they were like, yeah, that person just changed for us, that
Mhm.
because of that story. And for me, because I could tell that story word for word. And also, even because it was a in person, also the body language, because she was standing and she was, showing sort of also what she was saying with her hands.
Yeah.
But the thing is that I will remember that story. I forgot her name. That's me. I forget names because there were a lot of people. There was quite a big group of people, and I only saw them 6 hours, and so
Yeah.
I forgot their name. I won't forget the stories. I forget. I know all of their stories,
Yes.
right? All of the
Yeah.
participant stories. I will be able to remember all of them, and I have a terrible memory. So, but next time I'll meet them, I'll go like, "Oh, you are the lady of this and this
Yeah.
story."
Yeah.
I will remember this. So, and they changed and they became personal, and their sort of their manager was there, sort of the quite a quite of a senior person, and
Mm.
he told his story, and they were like, yeah, it's so interesting how the relationships change and the way you see
Yeah.
people change, and so the power of storytelling just for your colleagues, just to kind of create this real connection on a
Mm.
human level. And the
Mm.
other thing that happened, this last thing I'll say about this workshop, but is that this was sort of connecting to what you were saying about permission, giving yourself permission. But so there were a few uh, ladies there, and they said, well, besides thinking that their stories are not interesting, um, that they're not good at storytelling, also they
Mm.
thought the company is not interested in our stories. And that was also an interesting moment in the group. They were like, oh,
Yeah.
is that true? That's an assumption. Like, why? So, and I said, and they were really, really good at story. I told them the same as you. You're telling stories all the time. Everybody was, everything they shared was a story. And I said, I just gave you permission. That's all. I didn't do
Yeah.
anything. I just gave you permission to share stories. And then you had permission, and then you shared stories, and something changed.
Yeah.
And that's all. So give yourself permission. But it takes courage, right?
Mm. Mm. Yeah. Um, I worked with someone to do social media content for him. He was a chef, and this was in 2018. So in 2018, Facebook had just started Facebook Live. So any Facebook Lives you did was promoted a content. It was almost the same as if you put paid spend behind it. It got pushed to the front of everyone's feed. So I said to him, "You need to get comfortable on on camera, and we're going to start doing these lives." And he said, "Well, what am I going to do?" And I said, "Well, what you do in the kitchen. You're going to cook." And he's like, "But why would anyone want to watch me cook?" And I said, "Have you watched TV? Have you have you watched TV lately? I know you're very busy, so maybe you don't." And he said, "Well, what do you mean?" I said, "Half of TV is people cooking. Every other show is about cooking or traveling and cooking or family and cooking or some cooking is huge. It's like we spend a lot of time doing it. And not only are we cooking and eating, we like watching other people cooking and eating. We're a very bizarre animal." And so he said, "Well, I could cut up some steak." And I said, "Yes, but you're cutting up $800 Wagyu. Do you know how many people will say they've done that in their lives? Very few." But he discounted everything he did. And he was like, "No one's going to watch me do this." Let me just fast forward to today. So it's almost 6 years, 7 years later. He flies internationally around the world. He teaches online. He runs cooking classes. He's constantly on camera. He's learned the value of his particular type of story. He's learned how interested people will spend. Some of his private cooking classes are $1,000 per person. Will spend that much money to go in and slice up and watch him cut up $800 steaks, right? And he thought his story was so boring. He was like, "Who's going to watch me do this?" And I said, "Hopefully one day the world." And that's what he's doing. And everyone does this, and everyone's interesting, and everyone has a story. But what's important is finding what's magical about your story. And we've all got it. And, he was the same. I really had to push this guy. And now he doesn't need me anymore. We don't work together, not because there's anything wrong, but he knows what he's doing. He does what he does, right? He's
Okay,
learned and he's set
okay,
free.
but now you're just an employee at a large organization, and
Hmm.
I'm just an don't,
Just
don't,
an employee.
just an employee anyway. But I
Yes.
mean, you're not like you're not C-level. You're not maybe you work at I don't know, whatever, IT administration, whatever. You're doing
Yeah.
something really wonderful and important for the company, for sure. But
Hmm.
and then here we go. Like storytelling is really important. And really, why? Why is that important?
Yeah. So they need to find their Wagyu, their $800 Wagyu.
Uh-huh.
Everyone's right. They've all got it. So people will say, "No one listens to me when I talk." And I said, "You know what? I'm sure that that's not true. It might be that they don't understand what you're saying. So then the things you're saying aren't coming back to you, or the information you're passing on, they're not able to complete it because they're not sure what they're supposed to do." And so this will often be with people who work a lot in tech. It's something that other people don't understand. And I said, you have to find the bridge between you and them. So when you're talking to your audience, you need to put it in a way that they will understand it. So if I tell this story about me as a child. My mom told me this story about road safety, and she didn't tell me, "Look both ways before you cross the street because you might get hit by a car and then you might die," because that's not going to mean anything to me as a 5-year-old. She told me, "Look both ways so you don't get hit by a car, get rushed to the hospital, and miss your own birthday party." Because I was 5, I loved birthday parties, I knew what those were. So you have to find your birthday party. You have to find the thing that connects you to your audience, and you tell the story in the way that they're going to get it. And we often go, oh, what's interesting to me? And then I share that information. But really, our audience is our editor. We have to ask, what's interesting to our audience? And then we tell the story in the way that they understand it and they find it interesting.
Yeah. So if you have stories, so one of the things, if you don't believe your stories are interesting, and sometimes it's even, you don't even remember
Mm,
them as stories, right? So
mm,
so it takes such an effort to dig into your past, because all your stories come from what you have experienced, to kind of go and dig into your sort of past and go like, okay, did anything interesting happen to me? And to be honest, sometimes I have the same. I go like, what do I have that is relevant for this moment that I
yeah.
went through? And it takes effort, it takes energy, and
Hmm.
then you go, oh wait, no, wait, oh of course, oh I had this thing, or because sometimes stories are small stories. They don't have to be large, huge, life-changing events. They can be little
Yeah.
things, right? So
Yeah.
looking both ways. But also, for instance, I sprained my ankle because I thought I was still very young and was able to play football. And so, well, yeah. And I wanted to really, also because I want my son to be proud of me, I think.
Yeah.
So I go like, okay, I joined this football team, and they asked me to play a game way too soon. The season hasn't started. I thought I have some weeks, but I don't. So they said, can you play this weekend? I said, yes. Anyway, I went. I can do this. I sprained my ankle. Okay. Now, if you have your ankle sprained, it's quite painful, obviously. But
Mm,
what I did was sort of, it really was very swollen. I thought, okay, I have to kind of, not put any pressure on it. So I really stayed away from putting pressure, and so I put my foot up. I
mm,
made all the effort not to put any pressure on the ankle. Okay, it took 2 weeks, 3 weeks. And I'm
mm.
like, wait a minute, this takes so long. So I went to the physiotherapist, and they said, because I was wearing this sort of bandage kind of contraption thing on my ankle, and she said, "Why are you wearing that?" I said, "Because I need to kind of take the pressure off my ankle." She said,
Yeah.
"Why?" I said, "Well, because I don't know. I think it feels safe. I think," and I look, and she looks at me. Yes, and I said, "I think it's more in my head." She said, "Yes, I think it is." Okay. And she said, no. And she gave me all these exercises. And I said,
Uh,
everything you're teaching me now is what I try not to do. And
all
she said,
right.
no, you have to move it. It has to, it has to, so you sometimes, something happens, you do the opposite of what you're supposed to do. Right. And you need
Mm,
someone who
mm.
says, to look at you and go like, no.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's a story I used the other day of
Yeah.
something, because when we are in a crisis, like we are
Yeah.
now in the market, in a lot of
Yeah.
businesses, a lot of agencies, a lot of creatives are in a sort of a crisis.
Yeah.
A lot of businesses are, and don't stop putting pressure on yourself and doing things and moving. Don't stop moving. Don't stop exercising. Don't stop innovating.
Yeah.
Start moving, start exercising, start doing this. You're doing the opposite of what you're supposed to do, according to my physiotherapist, and
Yeah.
and she's very clever. So
Right.
anyway, see, that's a story. It's just my
Yes.
ankle being sprained. I
Yes.
used it, and I thought, oh, that's a story. I could use that,
Yes.
and I bet people will remember that, opposed to me saying, no, you have to innovate, you have to change, you have to kind of,
Mm.
research shows that if when things are bad, you have to kind of start moving instead of stepping. That's like, yeah, they'll remember me being like stupid and spraining
Yeah.
my ankle.
Yeah. Yeah. People forget information. They remember stories. Where our brain is hardwired for it. That's what it does. And that's why stories have transferred knowledge for generations. We put the information in a story. It's like giving the dog the pill in the piece of cheese, because we know that the dog won't eat the pill, but the dog will just swallow the cheese straight down, and then they take their medicine. So that's how humans do it. We have to put the information in the cheese, and then we go, like just eat it up. And then we have the stories, and we eat those stories up, and then we get we ingest the information. We don't mean to. We don't like information. In fact, I feel that humans don't really like information. We just like stories. That's what we want. Yeah, but you're absolutely right.
But why do we not? I mean, okay, this is, it sounds like common sense,
Yeah,
and still we're teaching people this, and people go like,
yeah,
oh no, I don't have any story. No, I don't know. I can't do it. I can't tell stories.
yeah.
What happened? Why do people
Um,
forget?
you know,
Why isn't this like second nature? Because in a
right.
way it is, because our brain, or we are storytelling machines.
Yes.
So what's happening? What's wrong?
Yeah, I feel like it's such a complicated thing because I think things it's so many levels. It gets kicked out of us by so many things. Like school information is prioritized. Information, just regurgitating it, just memorizing and regurgitating it, is prioritized. When you get into work situations, it's like, well, just what are the facts? What's the information? And then people are throwing that around as if this is the prize. These are the prizes, but it's not presented in a way that anyone understands it. And then people, worse, don't want to sound silly, so they pretend to understand it. And then you've just got all this information flopping around and no one gets what's going on. And so I think there's also this feeling, and I think in particular in Western culture, that you have to be an expert in something to do it. You can't
Mm.
just paint. You have to take a painting class, or you need a teacher, or you need someone to. You don't need any of that. You don't. I was in a painting class a couple weeks ago, and the man he's an Aboriginal artist, and he learned how to paint from cartoons. He watched the cartoons with his brothers, and then they all drew after they watched the cartoons, and then he became the best at drawing the cartoons. And then he started talking to some uncles, some his uncles, and they taught him different techniques for painting, and then he starts making Aboriginal art. And that was his journey. He didn't he played, he experimented, he learned things, and then he made art. That's how you make art. That's how you tell stories. That's how, like, I'm also an actor. There's not like, this is the acting process and you tick a box. You play. And the word for play is play in English. I don't know what it is in Dutch, but it's the same word for a reason, because we play. We go up and we're experimenting with our emotions, our bodies, our reactions. It is a form of play, and we're always experimenting. And you never know how an information or an insight or an emotion will come to you, because it comes to you in all different ways all the time. No matter how many times you've done the lines, you always are having a new experience. So there's people who are good at acting, but you're never an expert, because you will always learn, and you learn through that play. So we really, in Western thinking, we need to get rid of this. I need a degree or permission, or I need like a person to say that's how you do it and I follow. No. There's 10 million ways to tell a story. There's 10 million ways to share something, and it's all valid. And especially in different cultural aspects, Western storytelling dominates, but it is not the way to tell a story. It is how
Mm.
it primarily happens in the West, but it doesn't make it right, and it is definitely not the only way.
Yeah, interesting how yeah, my brain went to, like, so because there are a million different ways of telling a story, and there's also in the we're living in an age of well, technology, AI, for instance. Is there a Because, well, I have an opinion about this. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this.
Mhm.
I have an opinion on everything. Uh, yeah, sorry. Not always right, by the way, but there's always an opinion.
Yes.
So, what, why so is there a relationship between kind of the growing interest in storytelling, or the importance of storytelling,
Yeah.
um, and artificial intelligence, and the rise of artificial intelligence, or large language models, if you will.
Hmm. Mm. So are we getting more interested in it because we
Does it have a is there a relationship between the two? What is there, or
yeah,
is there tension between the two? What is the you know are we
yeah,
is it more important? Is it less important? Or is storytelling going to disappear anyway because ChatGPT is going to tell us all the stories? Because it can.
it
Yeah,
can,
tell me a
yeah,
story about a wolf and a lady that is lost in the forest, and with you can make up all kinds of, and it goes like, that's a really good idea, Arne.
yeah,
And it tells you this story, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah. There, oh yeah, this is such a complicated thing, right? Because it can tell a story, but it's not very good at it.
Not yet,
Um,
not yet. But
it's not
let's
yet.
assume it's going to be. But let's assume it's going to be extremely good at it,
Okay.
because it's
I
probably going to be. It's probably going to be, and who knows? I mean, there's so many bad stories that
yeah,
have been extremely successful, right? I mean, just look at
yeah,
most of, sorry, but Hollywood movies, not really. They're the same stories. You go like, the movie starts, and you know exactly what's
mm,
going to happen, which
mm,
which might be comforting. You're like, that's nice. I don't have to think about this. Is whatever. They just
mm.
regurgitate the same story over and over again. But anyway, sorry, go.
Yes, yeah. Okay, so yes, it probably will get better, but my thinking here is that it's going to get better in a way that humans aren't humans aren't a comparable better in the way it's going to get better. I'm trying to like think how to say this, because the way that I see AI evolving is that AI is really good at giving you the stuff that you want, right? It's reacting to your prompts. AI doesn't have, like, writers are really concerned about losing their jobs because they don't have an identity outside of writing. Like there's yes, of course they have roles and they have things, but they get up in the morning and the drive is to write, to create. They have to do it. And they don't know who they're going to be if they're not doing that,
Mhm.
right? Whereas AI, it doesn't. It doesn't have that. It doesn't wake up and go, I gotta write. There's stories burning inside me. It's reacting to prompts and to commands and to parameters set. So the way in which it will evolve will be based on the systems of prompts that are given to it and the way it learns through that and what it knows that we like.
Mhm.
The thing about good writing is it gives us not what we like but what we need, and only a human could do that. Because if we get what we want all the time, we would
Mhm.
be the worst creatures. We would be horrible because we think we know what we want, and then but if we get what we need, that's when we do well. But it's other humans going, "Hey, hold on. No, we're going to give you this instead. I want cake every day for breakfast." No, you're going to have, muesli, and you're going to have juice and fruit because that's what you need. Does that
Well,
make sense?
that's so interesting. Yeah, I don't think I've ever thought about it through that lens, because this would be your say. So if you use movies again as an
Mm,
example, um, there is a movie that is actually something. If you get what you want, you get sort of you will never create a story that is going to challenge you or
mm.
make you uncomfortable, or right. So
Yeah.
and at the same time also, I think that suppose you could, and I would say, I would like to see a movie that is going to make me cry. And then you go like, and then it's going to try, and you go like, where's the, I don't know. I don't think that's not real, because it's no surprise. It's not. And
Yeah.
yeah, I think that there's a connection to that and sort of lived experience because
Yeah.
right, and you just also mentioned art, but I think the same probably for any story. I think there is a big difference between stories that are fictional, right? So you
Mm.
could argue fictional stories, AI could kind of start writing fictional stories that are based on the way we tell stories. And you cannot say, well, use in sort of an Eastern way of telling stories with an open ending and, whatever.
Mm. Mm.
You could do that. And then you get and then that could work. I guess it could work. But there's a big difference between if you know that someone who wrote the story actually went through some of these based on real life experience, it is so much different. Like a
Yeah.
documentary about something real or a movie that is about something real, that because AI is dead. It's a dead, it's made of
Mm.
metals and dead things. We are
Yeah.
alive. Every
Yeah.
cell in our body is alive, right?
Yeah.
So AI doesn't have friends or parents or sprained its ankle. It could tell a story. It did. You go like,
Yeah.
no, you didn't. So in a way, it is a bit boring, really. And I think
Yeah.
I think it's going to be more boring. The more you know, like this is just like, this is just kind of a blend of all this stuff, and it's not real. So
Yeah.
I think the difference between real lived experience and real lived experiences and stories about lived experience and
Mm.
you know or stories or art from people that that you connect to. Like I always use that example of art, for instance, if Van Gogh turned out to be all fabricated and all lies and that never really happened, and it's
Mm.
all AI or whatever, they made it
Yeah.
up. Are the paintings the same? Do they have the same value? No,
Yeah.
because it is actually the story of the artist that is part of it, is within your art.
Yeah.
It's this, right? It's the story that makes it so amazing and special
Mm.
and different or whatever, or painful or emotional, right? The
Yeah.
emotional connection is through lived experience. And so I think that is right. I think that's the big difference between AI. So I think that in a world with tech and AI and large language models and whatever, we can all kind of generate with technology, cannot compete with lived experience.
No. Yeah.
It just cannot. We can't replicate it because it's not true. And if it's not true, I mean, it might have its own stories. So it might
Yes.
go like, I don't know if you ever read or seen the movie of the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, but there's this kind of this very a depressed robot, which I like. You're gonna get, because there's like this depression, and we are humans, so we put our emotional kind of, yeah, right. So I've
Yeah.
heard stories of someone who thought their robot vacuum cleaner was in love with their French table because every time it bumped into the French table and it just couldn't get, and you're like, oh, I think he's in love with the French table,
Yeah.
right? Right, we do that. We
Yeah.
turn, we put these our emotional values and emotions on these things, like we do with
Yes.
with our pets and our and robots. So robots will become sort of, we will give them emotion because
Yeah.
we put them, we put it on them.
Yes. We do. We project it. Yeah. We can't help it. We're
Right.
very emotional creatures. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. So I think storytelling is going to be more important. I think it is something that is, and it's interesting. You said you don't need a teacher, but you do need someone to kind of give you the sort of the confidence and give you sort of this little kind of lift where you go,
Yeah.
oh, okay, I know, I get confidence and I can give. So first you need someone who gives you permission, and then you have to be able to give yourself permission, I think,
Yeah. Yes.
right?
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Like, I'm not going to do myself out of a job. If you want a storyteller to
You
train
don't need us.
you know, definitely let me know. I'm happy to help you. But what I want to say is, I don't want somebody coming back to me every 2 months. Can you teach me again? No. I taught you once, or I can teach you different things, but I'm not going to teach you the same skill over and over, because the way you learn is to do it and to keep doing it, and you keep refining, and you play and you experiment and you play, and then you will find your rhythm. And then if you want to go, all right, I want master tips, sure, come back, but I'm not going to teach you storytelling 101 again, because you've been told, and now you need to go play and experiment.
Yes. All right. Cool. Thank you very much for this conversation.
Yes, it was a pleasure.
Yeah, we'll do it again another
Yes.
day, and we'll share more stories. For now,
Perfect.
thank you very much. All right,
Thank you.
I'm going to end the live stream,
Great.
and then there you go. And it is